That probably means we're ready to go, huh?
Yes, that means we're ready to go.
Okay.
Well, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to Journey to Enrollment. I hope you'll find this fruitful. Our staff in in Cornerstones has been working on the Journey to Enrollment for several months now. We've come up with a lot of great, I think, ideas of how to look at our program differently. Some of them were painful, but what we'd like to do at this point is Becky's going to work with the rest of the programs in the state who want to participate and really look at their program data and how their students are coming into your program, and eventually how you're retaining your students. It's going to be a multi-step process. But Becky's going to answer a lot of our questions today. And Becky, I'm going to take it away because I love this program. So even on my vacation, which you're hearing waves, I'm sure, I am involved with this. It's painful, but I've learned a lot, and I continue to find new things. So Becky, take it away.
All right, thanks, Kim. Yeah, so our purpose today is really to kind of preview this federal initiative that John and Laura Smith-Hill and I, John Anderson and Laura Smith-Hill and I went through as a state team a couple of years ago. And really, the Journey to Enrollment at the federal level was designed to help programs and states increase enrollment through a long-term multi-step process. And John, I apologize, I might put you on the spot just a little bit here, but I'm going to share some things that I think you've already shared with all of us on multiple occasions. Our state enrollment is down. In 2018, our statewide enrollment was 2,379. By 2021, it had dropped to 1,671, which is a decrease of about 30%. Now, I know what everybody's thinking, right? We had kind of a global pandemic in the middle of that time period, but the reality is our enrollment as a state was decreasing prior to COVID, and it really has not bounced back since the end of the pandemic the way we would have expected it to. That also happened at the federal level, which was the impetus behind this initiative that they launched. It's a priority to bring back those statewide enrollment numbers to close to at least the levels that they were in that kind of 2018 era. And again, this is a trend nationwide, which is why Octane has invested in this training. John, did you have anything to add to that?
Becky, thank you. I would just add that, right now, as of today for this program year, we're sitting at right around 1,500. So we're actually going to dip again due to a confluence of reasons. And then at some point too, when we talk about capacity and increased state general funds, I was in DC for the first time for that federal meeting in 4 years. With COVID, we ended up having a 4-year hiatus and moved everything virtual. But we've looked at those historical figures of federal funding, and I'm very grateful for all of the increases in federal funds over the years, as well as the significant increases in state general funds. But when we look at the funding levels from 20 years ago, that funding level would be worth $2.2 million in today's money. And, we receive about 1.4. So it is a complex topic, but I think through this lens, we can really begin to delve the data, and I'm glad you're leading the charge. Thank you.
Thanks, John. So whenever anybody says something like long-term multi-step process to me, I immediately get a little itchy, and I'm sure that some of you are the same. So you have questions. I know you have questions, and here are the questions that we're going to attempt to answer during today's presentation. If you have additional questions along the way, don't hesitate to ask those as they come up. I hope you all know me well enough by this point to know I do not mind if you kind of interrupt me in the middle of a presentation with a timely question about the content that we're discussing. You'll also notice we've got a lot of our Cornerstone staff members on the webinar today, and I've planted them here quite honestly, to talk about some of the experiences that they've had going through this process over the last few months. So they'll also be able to chime in and give you some of their experiences as we continue to work through this process. So what is the Journey to Enrollment? In its simplest form, this initiative walks your program staff through three main phases that you see on the screen. First, you're going to analyze program data from the last few program years in an effort to identify the people that you're enrolling and those that you might not be currently reaching. In some cases, those might be people that you were reaching in the past who've kind of dropped off of the program numbers that you serve. In some cases, they might be new populations in your communities that somehow you're not reaching and bringing into your program yet. So we start with the data, and from that data analysis, you'll develop profiles of the people or personas that you want to pull into your program in greater numbers. So that's the enrollment piece that we're talking about, right? Part two is taking a critical look at the way people find your program and the process they follow to enroll in your program. This, I think, has been some of the hardest but most valuable work that we've gone through. Your goal here is to really think in terms of, if I am a student trying to find an adult education program in my community, what do I have to go through to find the program, to learn about the program, to figure out if it's right for me to enroll in the program, to actually get started. So your goal is to identify any possible pain points that the personas that you've identified, those people who maybe you aren't reaching in the numbers that you would like to, might encounter that might be discouraging them from enrolling in your program, that might make them say, you know what, maybe this isn't for me. Maybe this is too much work. I can't even figure this out. I'm frustrated. Those kinds of spots that our students or potential students might encounter as they try to join us. And then the third part, using all of the information you've gained, you'll develop an action plan for your program to help try to minimize those pain points and maximize the enrollment of those target groups. Questions about any of that? Okay, so it's up to you to decide who participates in the Journey activities from your program. But I will say it's essential to have program administrators on board and at least some of your classroom teachers to be part of this process. In addition, I think you probably also want to include any support staff who are part of that enrollment process. If you have support staff who help do intakes or who make appointments even, people who are answering the phones and taking phone calls and answering questions, they're all part of that public facing piece for our programs. And they could be sources of pain points or they could be sources of solution for pain points. The insights of all of those groups are really vital to building a clear picture of the enrollment path for your participants. You should also consider how you might gather some input and feedback from people that you're already serving currently, and maybe from some of those who haven't followed through in enrolling with your program, to try and get some student insights to help you understand what parts are frustrating that you haven't thought about. And really, when you start taking a comprehensive look at all of the things that you need to look at in terms of enrollment, you know, we thought through our website, our Facebook posts, you know, how hard is it to find our phone number? How hard is it to find our building and know where you can park and know what door to come in? And all those different kinds of things come into play. And when you start really breaking down that whole process, you want as many minds kind of working on that as possible to think about all of the ins and outs that our students face when they're trying to come into our programs. So here's the big one people always wonder, right? What's the time commitment? Again, this is a multi-phase initiative. We're kicking off with multiple sessions during this year's Summer Summit. So you'll see the Summer Summit kickoff. That's really, we're digging into the data during Summer Summit. So we're really going to be working hard to look at numbers over the last few years for your programs. John and I are going to be supplying some of the data for you to examine. You definitely can bring other things that you think might help you gain insights into what's happening in your programs. So that's really going to be the focus of that Summer Summit session. Then you can see we've got virtual support built in here. And we say virtual support, but it can also be face-to-face. Both Kim and I are going to make ourselves available to come either to your programs or to meet with you virtually and help you with any troubleshooting or facilitate some of the conversations. Sometimes it's hard when you're all embroiled in it to kind of take that step back and look through a more objective lens. And sometimes it's helpful to have somebody who's able to help you do that. So you've got that support in between the group sessions. Session 2, we have slated for August 31st. We're not 100% if that's going to be face-to-face or virtual yet, but we're going to be getting information out as soon as we can. During that one, we're actually going to be taking the data that you've worked with over Summer Summit and building those personas that you want to try and attract in your program. Then again, you can see the virtual support following that session. At the end of September, we're going to be pulling together again in a larger group, and then we're going to build what we call journey maps. They're visual representations of what our participants go through as they try to enter our program. So we'll spend the time working on those. And again, you'll work on those again as well after that meeting, and you'll get that virtual support. The end of October is actually when we're going to build action plans based on everything that you've learned, and then follow-up support as needed. Questions about that?
So Becky,
Sorry.
the journey map will be the culmination of session 3 and action plans, the focus of section 4, is that correct?
Yes.
Okay.
I believe that's correct. And then the last one is we're sharing our action plans in progress.
Oh, in November.
In
Okay,
November.
right. Yep.
Yep, kind of that culminating
Understood.
activity. Yep, yep.
Thank you.
Yep. Thank you for the question, John. I had forgotten about that last session. So when you're thinking about doing that much work, you want to know, what am I going to get out of this, right? The what's in it for me. So here are some outcomes. There's a lot of research on the journey mapping process across different businesses and different organizations, and that's where this list of outcomes comes from. But I'm also going to ask my colleagues at Cornerstones to maybe talk about some of the outcomes that they've observed so far. We're not completely done. We've taken our action plans and started working on implementation of some of the pieces of them, and then that's an ongoing process. But here's what the research says you can expect as an outcome of working through this journey mapping process. Number one is working together from a common perspective and viewing our processes. Gaining that common vision helps everyone in your program to know that you're on the same page. You understand where you are and what you need to do to continue to improve the enrollment process for your participants. So a shared vision of where you're at and where you're going, which I think we all agree we sometimes lose sight of in our day-to-day work. The second one is considering the things that you do every day from the participant perspective, which really forces us to see the work that we do in a different way and consider all of our actions in a different light. Third one of the greatest benefits of a project like this is the time that it gives staff to work collaboratively. As much as we try to build staff time into our schedules, we often can feel like we're working in silos at times. And I think that collaborative work time can open new avenues of communication and problem solving that we maybe haven't had an opportunity to build on a regular basis. I know one side note from this that Kim and I got was we have a weekly staff meeting every week, right? So we feel like we're keeping that line of communication open. But one of the things that our staff asked for after we'd been through this process is every once in a while, about 3 weeks, 4 weeks, after our regular staff meeting, we've scheduled in a second hour to just work on Journey to Enrollment. And what would happen then is we'd put people into breakout rooms because things are slightly different for our GED teachers and students and our ESL teachers and students. So we had these breakout rooms for those two groups. And after a couple times doing this, our staff came back to us and said, you know, we need more time in small groups like this, because it's really, really helpful for us to be able to talk just as an ESL staff, as a GED staff, about some of the things that happen in our classrooms and just happen in our programs day to day. So that collaborative time has been a real bonus, I think. The fourth one there, the persona building activity really immerses you in the participant perspective. And here's, I'm going to say this knowing that some of you are going to have an instant reaction that, no, that's not true, right? But I know we all make every effort to consider the participant experience in our program, right? We try to put our students first. But I truly think it's easier than we think to lose sight of it, especially in light of some of the pressures that we have, like this time of year. Federal guidelines, state expectations, everyday job duties, all of the paperwork and compliance requirements that we have, right? They eat up so much of our time and attention. And I think so many times we can get caught up in the processes at the expense of the people. And like I say, I know, because I know all of you that you try your best not to do that, but I also know how hard it is to maintain that on a regular basis. So putting ourselves kind of fully in that role of the person coming in, wanting to take part in our program, I think is a really valuable experience. Journey mapping highlights the importance of those personal connections in every aspect of our work. It underscores the key role that every person in our program plays in that participant experience. Like I said, from the person who answers the phone, do they sound friendly? Do they sound helpful? Do they sound scary? That can make the difference to our students. And then that final product is an action plan that is developed collaboratively from the perspective of our participants, again, that we can use to guide us in improving the enrollment experience for all of our participants and our staff. Because one of the things that we do as well is consider the pain points from the staff perspective. What things make it harder for our staff to do their jobs on a regular basis when they're bringing new students into the program? So, what questions do you have?
So Becky, I'd be curious, you know, in that previous slide, you talked about how your staff were seeking more time together to work collaboratively. I think of the insights gained. I'd like to hear from them just in terms of collegiality. Were there any moments where, I don't know, a new awareness might be noteworthy, or you can maybe contextualize it for us? There's so many facets to this, right? Equality, adult ed programming includes the agency or organizational purpose vision. We're talking about the intake, the pre-assessments. I mean, there's so many facets, and I'm just curious what they would like to share.
I can share a little. So I'm pretty new to Cornerstones, and relative to my colleagues, I'm very new to teaching. So the time, and also I work mostly remotely. I'm in Vermillion, like quite far from most of my colleagues. So having this, I really look forward to the time because I have a million questions, and I am looking for a lot of advice, and it's so great to have my very experienced colleagues patiently listen to all the things. I'm like, okay, well, what about this? What do you do about this? And it's, yeah, it's really helpful for me.
Carolyn, and welcome, by the way. I have yet to make your formal acquaintance, but I look forward to it. And I think, you know, you raise even another facet. This can be part onboarding, right? Where senior staff and new staff alike can really share their perspectives, and they have, you know, commensurate, you know, those new keen eyes can really see things oftentimes more objectively. Other comments? Thank you, Carolyn.
I think because we all live in different areas and we come together, I might have an idea of something that no one else thought of. I mean, it's like all one minds into one, and something might be working in our area that they could try in theirs. I mean, that's the biggest thing, is like if something I may never have thought of, and then someone else mentions it and it just kind of clicks. I mean, it all like, yeah, you know, we're not going to think of everything. So having all the different areas together, it gives so many different views on how we can act and react and do things.
Excellent point, Jennifer. I'll call that, you know, the dissemination of promising practices. Perfect. Another required state leadership activity.
I may just be kind of echoing what Jennifer said or expanding on it, but I feel that I'm involved with the GED breakout sessions, and I feel like it really gives us a chance to share and kind of pool our strengths, so to speak, because we all have strengths and weaknesses, and being able to see what my colleagues have created and discuss and share, and you know, maybe also look at some, you know, manners in which I've looked at things, and kind of changing my perspective on things by seeing it through the eyes of someone else. I think that's been very valuable.
So Jeremy, I don't want to oversimplify. Do you think I could say, right, almost that teacher development through collegiality?
Yeah.
And networking? And
Yeah, absolutely. I think networking would be
and
an
building
excellent
one.
word to use with that. Yeah.
Okay. Thanks for sharing.
Another thing that we did in the GED group and the ESL group was we standardized some of the things that we're all doing, but maybe a little differently. And we still have the independence to do things kind of the way that works for us. But we have things like email templates and document templates that make everything a lot faster. You know, the things that you repeat for student after student, which makes some of those tasks like sending emails to new students, sending them their class information, sending them their test scores, all those things take a lot less effort now, which means I can spend that time coaching more students because each task takes a little bit less time. And I've also seen students say that they like being able to see with some of the new stuff we've done and kind of the extra time. Now that when they start, they can see kind of that whole path from beginning to end instead of just that next step. So I think that's been useful for them.
Nikita, can you unpack that last bit a little more? You were saying the students appreciate that because they can what? They can see their work in a more of a portfolio start to finish, or their progress is more demonstrable, or what?
I think when students are enrolling, there's a lot of new information. They haven't seen a GED program before. A lot of times they don't know what to expect. And I feel like before they knew what to expect for the next appointment. Like in the next appointment, you're going to come in and take your tape test. when I go through kind of the information about our program. And then after that, we'll pick a class. And now in that first appointment, I can say, okay, the next appointment, you're going to do your tape test. Then we'll come up with a plan. We'll meet a separate time to come up with a plan. And I can kind of map out to them, like, this is what you do next, all the way to when you're taking your final test. And some students have been really surprised that we have it so figured out, or know the pathway so well, because to them it's starting from scratch. They're starting from the very beginning. So I think that's been really helpful for students to be able to visualize what's coming, or see how the step they're on leads to the next step.
Oh, wow. That's great. I'm going to try to articulate that in the chat, but it sounds like that it's almost the journey mapping efforts and endeavors have allowed you to help with student onboarding or these transitions, or simply, to your point, your familiarity is proving to be comfort to the students.
Well,
As you speak to it, go ahead.
The other thing you think about with that statement makes me so excited is because we're going to focus so much not only in journey to enrollment, but disabilities, or I hate to call it disabilities, learning differences, and all those types of things that are happening in our students. We're going to focus on that at Summer Summit. And one of those particular topics, like the way Nikita addressed it just now, is going to be talked about a lot at Summer Summit with some of our presenters. So that will tie back in with some more resources.
I think that one of the things we found is we know the big picture, and oftentimes we make assumptions that our students are with us and seeing that big picture, and really they're not. And that ambiguity or uncertainty can play a huge role in the stress level that they experience, not just when they come to us new, but as they're getting started. I think that, and we didn't really hear a lot from our ESL perspective, but just the language barrier and helping students understand the process and getting started when you're dealing with so many languages and we don't have a staff person who speaks every single one of those languages. How can we better help our English language learners to understand, here's how this starts, here's what you're going to be doing, and here's the path that you're going to follow. That I think is very important. One of my favorite recent stories is I was helping a new student to understand our program. We were using Google Translate. And at the end, I had kind of explained, like, okay, so we've done this process and now your class starts on this day. And here's how, he was going to come into our office for class. So, okay, you will come here for class on these days at these times. And we will help you get started in class. We will be here to greet you. We will help you get started. And he asked in Google Translate, do I need to bring anything? And I said, if you want to bring paper and a pencil or a pen so that you can take notes, that's all you will need. Otherwise, we have everything that you will need for class. And he said something into his phone, into Google Translate, and then he held it out to me. And I swear, I want this on a sign. He's like, so you just show up and learn English, is how it translated to me. And I was like, yes, that's what you do. You just show up and learn English. But for him, that's what he wanted to know. Like, do I need to do anything else, or can I just show up here and you'll teach me English? So how can we make it that simple for everyone else who's thinking about our program or coming into our program too?
Also, like the map in a like the most basic way, just having the steps planned out and a visible finish line, I feel like makes a huge difference in both GED and ESL, because in both cases, it's not like 4 years and then you graduate. It's like, yeah, having a concrete goal is, I think.
Yeah. So I'm going to flash this at you, and I don't mean to scare you, but you know, we know at Cornerstones, we never do anything by half. And I'm not going to go through it in detail because I don't want to color anybody else's ideas about what they need to do here, but I'm going to resume sharing. Yeah, there it is. This is the result of our action plan. So we actually put it onto a spreadsheet. This first sheet in this Excel workbook or in this slides workbook is just the overview and the point person and the deadline. And then every single one of those items that you see, those 12 items, has its own tab where we've gone into more detail, and we've also kind of cross-referenced connected pieces. So that's kind of the plan that we've put together. And again, yours doesn't have to be that big. It doesn't have to be that comprehensive, but the whole goal is to figure out in your program, where are people encountering things that are frustrating to them and maybe make them not stay with you. We've been looking at some data, some statewide data for the second phase of this program federally. Kim and Amy and Laura and I are going to Austin at the end of this month for the second part of this federal training. And one of the things that we were looking at was what percentage of people leave our programs statewide before they hit that 12-hour mark. And then some other benchmarks as well, but it's not pretty, and it's not what I want for our program at Cornerstones, and I'm sure it's not what John wants for our program at the state either. We want to be able to know that the people who want and need our program are feeling comfortable coming in. And we know some people are going to elect not to come, right? I don't want people to come if it's not the right time or not the right fit for them. But I feel like we're maybe not reaching the number of people that we could be and should be in a lot of cases. And if there are reasons, I want to know those reasons. And if we can correct them, I want to correct them.
Yeah, and to that point, you know, another ancillary benefit or direct benefit even is that federally, unlike our WIOA partners, we're not required to conduct student satisfaction surveys. And everyone is so busy. It just seems like one other thing, but ultimately they're our clients, our participants. And so I'm really excited that it can be an opportunity for you locally to decide that this is a priority and it's a way we can embrace adult methodology, right? Empower our learners, help them find their voice. They're going to need to advocate for themselves in the workplace, at school, with their children, and on and on. And so I think there are lots of opportunities, potentialities here where this can function as, you know, sort of a student satisfaction evaluation agency self-review opportunity as part of that team building.
Any other questions or comments?
So Becky, if someone's unfamiliar, what kind of guidance do you want to give them regarding data and how we're able to help them with those? I know you had mentioned we have the previous year's data, but
Right.
Practically speaking, what are sort of the next steps?
You know, I can share that data prior to Summer Summit so that people have the ability to take a look at it as well, and we'll be working with it. But I think also if there are any data sources that you regularly reference in your program, certainly we can bring those with us. We can, you know, we're going to be set up so that we're actually digging in and working on data for, like I said, a couple of sessions at Summer Summit. So, you know, if you want to bring a laptop and we'll have access to the internet and you're actually opening up places and digging in as well. We looked at, see if I can pull it up quickly here. I have 4 separate Journey to Enrollment folders now. So it's a little bit scary. Let's pull up. DOC's not here. We'll pick on them. Take a look at what it looks like. So these are the data looks that we have prepared. And this just simply, it splits out the last four full program years, looking at trends in gender, age, race, ethnicity. Now, DOC is a little bit weird because we've got a tab for males and a tab for females because of how DOC works, right? But yours will have that breakdown. And then also looking at the age ranges and the race ethnicity. So what the federal folks gave us is exactly this. They gave it to us for the full state of South Dakota. And then you can see if it's a green box, you've either got a positive change or no change in the number of students in that category from year to year. If it's a red box, you've got a negative change. So you can easily kind of see at a glance what areas might be problematic in your program. Again, if you want to break this down to a more granular level for yourselves, I can certainly share how to do that, how we did that. We broke this down at Cornerstones down to our 5 geographic areas. So Aberdeen had a set of tables, Huron had a set of tables, and we looked at this that way. If you want to take deeper looks at, when do students leave? Are your students leaving before they hit the 12-hour mark? How many of them are leaving before they hit the 40-hour mark so they can post-test? Those kinds of things. Is there a specific, if you track by class, is there a specific class that has a different breakdown than others? I think you can look at it in many, many different ways. It's just going to depend on your specific program and your specific situation. So like I said, we've got some initial data to share. And I've got that all finalized so I can share it at any time with programs. I'll also be bringing it to Chamberlain for Summer Summit. But if you, again, want to start thinking about what kinds of data do we look at when we're thinking about students who come and maybe students who don't come, Table 2 and Table 2A, your people who don't even make it on to Table 2A, where are they at and what's happening with them? I think there are a lot of different things no, I was just going to say, I think there are a lot of different things that local programs probably utilize on a regular basis that you will know, or your data specialist will know. These are the kinds of things that would make sense for us to look at during that time. I interrupted you, John. What were you going to say?
No, I actually interrupted you, and I probably, it was a side item. When I was looking at that sheet, can you share your screen again?
Sure.
I was looking, I think, at row 11, and I wanted to make sure, no, I was looking at row 13. So I just wanted to make sure, in that instance, DOC males at that age 25 to 44, fiscal year 19 had 74. They had fewer in fiscal year 20, 13 fewer, but it was actually about little over 5% more, right? So that green isn't necessarily an indicator that the number went up, but
no,
that the percentage of that, right?
I pulled the wrong up. We're looking at the reportables and not the participants. That's why, because I ran them both ways.
Okay.
That's why it's weird. Let me pull the other one up.
And I didn't mean to.
Then it'll make more
digress.
sense. I'm glad that you noticed that, because it'll make more sense this way. So yeah, here's the people who actually counted, right? Here's your participants. I did the reportables because we like to look not just at the people who made it in, but also the people who didn't. So on the other one, green and red were flipped. So here you've got those 25 to 44s. And yeah, you can see that the actual participants went down in 19, but went slightly up in 20 and 21. DOC might have been the only people who were gaining students during COVID.
Okay.
No, I'm glad you caught that, John. I put them in different files specifically so that it would be less confusing, but then I confused us. Yeah. And again, I think it's interesting, you know, I can look at that data for other people's programs and see kind of broad stroke trends. But when I look at Cornerstone's data, I think about our people. And I know the same thing happens with all of you too. Your own data is more personal to you because you know the students and you know the people and you know some of the things happening in your communities and some of those trends. So I don't want to be the person making any kind of assumptions about what your data says. I think that that's part of the beauty of the process of a lot of different people looking at the data. I know that that's one point where at Cornerstones, we said we probably shouldn't have tried to do ESL and GED in the same year because it got a little bit overwhelming when we started and we were looking at a lot of data.
Yes, I will agree. That was, I thought I was drowning for a little bit. I got even kind of crabby.
Yeah,
Maybe.
oh, yeah, it was more than a little crabby. She was kind of crabby at me. The other thing I will tell you is I have done my absolute best to improve the product we were given by the federal government and to make it a little bit more user-friendly and hopefully a little more clear so that it can be a little less painful for all of you going forward. And my colleagues at Cornerstones, who always serve as the guinea pigs for these kinds of things for me, gave me good feedback on what worked well and what didn't work as well. So I appreciate them always for that. Other questions or comments?
Well, I can just attest to the fact that the further that we've gotten into this, the easier it's become to work with. And the easier it's been to see where we're really heading with it. And a lot of that has been the interaction between, staff.
I think anytime you can make it not a 1 or 2 person show, but the entire program show will be the most fruitful for a program. That's my personal opinion on it. I mean, I sat through it. Becky had been through the training. I hadn't. I went through it with staff and it was a very painful experience at the beginning to the point I was very frustrated. But I really think Becky's taken those things into consideration as she's kind of tweaked the federal stuff now so that hopefully it's not as painful for everyone. And then if you are a program that maybe is really split between ESL and GED, maybe take our suggestion and pick one to start with. It might be less painful.
Yeah, Debbie chimed in the chat and said it was definitely overwhelming at first. And I think, here's the other thing. It is an overwhelming process because it's a lot. John articulated some of that. It's not just, it's marketing and it's social media and it's the intake paperwork and it's the assessment and it's, how do you make an appointment and who does those appointments and what happens after the appointment. And, Nikita talked about the messaging, here's what the whole process is. And here are the pieces of the process for the people who just need the smaller pieces. It's so much. There's a reason that it's hard. And I think that going through that process and breaking it down can be really overwhelming. But I think that that's part of the benefit in the end is being able to isolate some pieces.
And I think don't let it scare you away though, because even if you're a program that's, got a lot of new staff and stuff like this, I think this is a great time to actually go through it because it may be even less painful for you because you don't have all that preconceived stuff that you're bringing to the forefront. And I think that and capitalize on Cornerstone staff and the pain they went through. And obviously, if you can beg, borrow, or steal anything as we move forward, I would definitely do that as well. I mean, I'm not ashamed to say I like to steal from other programs who have awesome stuff. So hopefully you'll find something that you can steal from us as well. We are
Thank you,
planning
everyone.
on, we will send, I honestly think it may already be programmed into my scheduled emails, but a registration process so that we know who's planning to participate as far as programs, so that we can make sure we focus our time and attention on those programs who want to go through this process. And then I'm just excited by it. I've learned a lot. One of the things that happened the other day is I have certain things that I do for the program each month, but I have a certain schedule I do them in just to keep my life sort of sane. And I had to move everything up so I could go on vacation. And all of a sudden I realized there was this glaringly obvious thing that we hadn't addressed yet as far as retention. And so now I'm really excited because I've done things a little bit differently this time. I found something like, oh, how are we going to deal with that? That's a problem. And so that was really exciting for me, because I don't know if before this program, if I would have looked at it that way to say, hey, here's a problem in a way, and how does it go into our program to fix it? So that was kind of exciting. Instead of just like, who isn't doing their job? It's more like, hey, this is an issue that we need. How are we addressing this? So I was excited by that.
Thank you, everyone, for attending this third Thursday training. I appreciate Cornerstone's staff sharing their empirical or personal experiences with the journey to enrollment and the journey mapping. And I look forward to seeing everyone next month at Summer Summit in Noakoma. In the meantime, enjoy the weather, drive safely. Take care.
Thanks all.
Thank you.